Today's reading from the Ashtavakya Gita, Song of Ashtavakya, the Heart of Awareness. And this selection is titled Happiness. Even if you have nothing, it's hard to find that contentment which comes from renunciation of the ego. I accept nothing, I reject nothing, and I am happy. The body trembles, the tongue falters, the mind is weary. Forsaking them all, I pursue my purpose happily. Knowing I do nothing, I do whatever comes my way, and I am happy. Bound to the body, the seeker insists on striving or on sitting still. But I no longer suppose the body is mine or is not mine, and I am happy. Sleeping, eating, walking, nothing good or bad befalls me. I sleep, I sit, I walk, and I am happy. Struggling or at rest, nothing is won or lost. I have forsaken the joy of winning and the sorrow of losing, and I am happy. For pleasures come and go. How often have I watched their inconstancy? But I have forsaken good and bad, and now I am happy. This is a translation, yeah. Well, the Gita itself is by Ashtavakya, who was a sage.
Oh, the Gita?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's in the Gita.
Yeah. This translation is by Thomas Byram. And there's another translation over there in the bookshelf that was done by Ramana Maharshi. They're slightly different just because of the cultural differences and the translation differences of the words. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome. I like this particular selection. Some of you have heard it before, I'm sure, if you've been coming for a while. From this Gita, because what's really described here is this way, this tendency in the mind which bounces back and forth from one side of the duality to the other, from good to bad, right? From body to no body, from, whatever the mind does. We all know, we're familiar with that. And so what he points toward here is the experience of freeing oneself from this tendency in the mind to bounce back and forth in our experience from one side of the duality to the other, and to label things good or bad, experiences, people, situations, thoughts, tendencies in the body and mind, to label these as good or bad and then react or respond accordingly, usually by swinging to the other side of the duality, or wishing we could, or attempting to do so. But what he says here and what he points out is that there is an innate happiness in us. And some of us say, I never have been able to find this innate happiness. Isn't it true? But this is in some way the purpose of the inquiry, and this is to just keep looking. But he also points to something else, and that is that no matter how we feel torn between one side of the duality to the other, or buffeted back and forth from one side of the duality to the other. If we hold to this knowledge that at our core we are this happiness, this silence, this freedom, then this tendency to bounce back and forth, when it does arrive or doesn't, you see, because he doesn't deny that it's there, right? He says, whether I'm struggling or not, I know that I'm happy. So he's not pointing to some ideal state in which we aren't buffeted by what happens in our mind and in our bodies and in the world. He's acknowledging that from time to time, this characteristic of struggle and the attempt to get away from things that we don't like, the unpleasant aspects of our experience, they do arise. And the thing that can carry us over and carry us through is this recognition that we are free. Even the mind doesn't want to acknowledge it at that moment. If we can simply remember that we are free and that our happiness is inherent in this quality of aware recognition, then we have the ship or the boat to sail over the stormy seas and come to the further shore. This is a term the Buddha used, the further shore. Come to this place where we recognize that at the end of our journey we come to some new experience of ourselves, which is aware, awake, loving, and free. So I do use this particular reading on the nature of happiness from this particular Gita from time to time, just to remind ourselves that freedom and happiness are not something that we're searching for, they're something that we are. And actually we have to give up the search outside ourselves, in the world, in desire, in our habit patterns of the mind. We have to give this search up and give ourselves the time it takes to see directly that we are already free. And that inside there is an innate happiness and peace. And it rests not in our mind, which is doing that dance of duality back and forth, but in the silence which is before the mind. So this is why I'm always encouraging you to be persistent in your remembrance of your own freedom. And that to do this, you have to rest in your already present silence, which is before the I rises and veils you from the truth, putting you back into the mind, and back into this game of bouncing from one side of the duality to the other. So we've been talking about this now for some time. And all of you have been talking in some ways about the progress that you're making and the understanding that's evolving. You know, there is really no progress in this. There is really only coming to understand that you are already here. And that when you remain in this here-ness, in this now-ness, you have this direct perception of yourself, not as a me, but as the all which is in everything. That which is aware here in each of us is that which is aware in everything. It is the foundation and the seat of all of our experience.
before I come here every Sunday, I go dancing. And what you're saying today is something that I feel all the time when I'm dancing. And I've a number of times thought of that when it's over, when the dance thing is over. How do I carry that feeling into life? Because I feel when I'm dancing, I'm just present, and that's it. And there's no thought happening. It's just presence and joy. And so I've often thought, how do I take this with me when I'm in the world? And I try it, like a lot of times when I leave dance, I come here, and then when I leave here, I'm still in that mode. And I try it when I'm walking and when I'm just being, but then I just forget. I just forget throughout the week or something. I have just times of forgetfulness, and I don't know. I guess I don't know how to maintain it. I guess it's just practice and practice and practice.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But there's another little trick that I use though that's also really helpful. And that is begin to notice that when you forget what you're calling forget, there's a way in which your mind is stopping there on that recognition that you have forgotten, and then hanging its identity on that. Right? What if you didn't pay any attention to that? You simply said, I just noticed I'm back.
Oh.
Right? I was forgetful a moment ago. Now I'm back.
Okay.
Because I cannot have seen that I forgot while I'm in forgetfulness. I can only see that I have forgotten when I have returned to presence. It's the only way I can see it. So this is a little trick, right? This is a thorn to remove a thorn. This is a little trick to begin to praise the mind, in effect, for the return to presence, rather than allowing the mind to identify and then cause some story, small or large, in some way, that sort of beats itself up because it recognizes that there was a moment of forgetfulness. So rather than carrying on that dialogue, right, which is actually reinforcing this idea that I've somehow failed, I have forgotten, I've lost it, whatever the story is in the mind, whatever the words that are used. Come to the recognition, come to the happiness, yes, of realizing, I'm back. I'm in presence again. And of course it's not I that's in presence, right? It's just that presence has returned. So if you can take that step further, which is not to identify with the I which has returned to presence, but to realize that presence has returned on its own, right? And shown you that a moment ago there was forgetfulness. And that you no more own this forgetfulness than you own this presence. Now you come to this place that he's talking about in this particular stanza, this particular poem, where whichever side of the duality you're seeing, whether you're seeing forgetfulness or you're seeing presence of mind, you're also resting in something else, which is prior to both. So yeah, just keep it up. You see, it's really helpful to understand what a gift it is to be able to see somehow in your life you came to a place, a book, a person, a thing, which gave you the capacity to see both when you are struggling, when you are forgetful, when you are not being present, and to see when presence is there. So somehow you've come to this, right? This is a great blessing. Just ask anyone who spends their life going through the belief that whether they're struggling, forgetful, or their presence, they don't notice it. And their whole life is about being thrown from one experience to another experience, from one buffeting to another, back and forth in duality. And it never dawns on them to ask the question, and what realizes this? What sees this? So you have a great gift in your life, a great opportunity. Because somehow, again, through no effort of our own, usually, in some way, we came into this knowledge. What a blessing. One of the things that's been being fed back to me from people who are watching on YouTube is how much they appreciate the fact that you share what's happening for you, so that they can also have their questions asked through you, and also so that they can witness through you the experiences that you're having, which are very similar to the ones that they're having. So this is something that we do together as a live group here, as a satsang group here, that we provide the opportunity for those who can't ask questions to ask questions, or to share their experience in some way by you sharing your experience. It's interesting to note that this is true, right? Because this is not my mind, right? Even though I might try to claim it, I am struggling, right? I am not free. I don't understand. Whatever the story is in my mind, this is the story of the mind. And this can be seen when someone from very far away can respond and say, oh, that was me that was asking that question. So then we come to understand that none of this in certain way is personal. It just isn't. If you talk to any person in depth, you see that every person is struggling in some way until they are entirely free. And this is not a bad thing, right? If you begin to know this, you begin to see this, then your mind and your heart can open in compassion for yourself, for the apparent other, for the mind that's struggling and suffering. Because one of the things that's really necessary when our mind is struggling, or when it's saying to us, I don't get this, or I don't understand it, or I'm forgetful most of the time, one of the applications, one of the practices that we can take up right in that moment that's very helpful is the practice of self-compassion. The understanding, this too shall pass. This is not me, this is a state of mind. Yes? This is a state of mind. And states of mind come and go. And we have to hear this, we have to realize this over and over and over. And we know that states of mind come and go easily, right? All we simply have to do to end a state of mind is fall asleep. Go back to the self, go back to that mind-free state of being that we experience when we go to sleep at night. If you fall asleep, typically by the time the morning comes, or by the end of your nap comes, whatever it is that you were gnawing on, or chewing on, or beating yourself up about, if it hasn't completely gone, it at least has diminished to a great degree. So it's very important that we begin to see that whatever's rising in the mind is temporary. And then to have compassion for the suffering that creates in the mind when the mind is struggling and suffering. Because if we apply compassion to ourselves and to the mind which is suffering in any given moment, we give the mind the space to let go, to stop clinging to what's happening, to our description of it, to our statements about it, our mental statements about it. To free ourselves in some way from that mind which has a tendency when we think it's not getting it right in some way, to become hypercritical. So how do we develop that kind of compassion for ourselves? The simplest way is just to let ourselves know, to say this to ourselves. Yes, I see that I'm suffering now, and it's okay. So on some level, we have to be able to be willing to accept what the state of mind is in a given moment. But if we're going to free ourselves from it, we have to be careful that we don't identify with the state that is present. So being compassionate means that we accept that this state of mind is here, that we are in fact struggling at this moment. And then we let it go. Consciously. We say, yes, but I am not that. I can see that I'm struggling in this moment, that the mind is really like a dog on a bone and it's just not wanting to let go of it. But you know, if you ever have approached a dog that has a bone and it starts to growl at you and it starts to snarl at you and you try to keep taking that bone away, you find yourself in a world of hurt over it, right? But as soon as you turn your back on that dog and walk away from it, the dog will just keep chewing on the bone and then it will just drop the bone and walk away. Now you can walk over and pick the bone up and the dog doesn't even notice because it has nothing, if you don't struggle with it, it has no interest in. Eventually it'll just lose interest in the bone and it'll drop it, right? Well, you have to be this way with your mind too. You have to know that by compassionately understanding I'm not this, I'm struggling with it, but I'm not that struggle, I'm not this thought. And loving yourself as you are. You've heard me all say this before. I call this standing in it. Standing in the difficulty, standing in the struggle, but without identification. This is me. That's what I mean by identification. That because I'm having this thought, because this struggle is here, because this experience is here, that this defines me. So by standing in it with the understanding and the knowledge, this is not me. This is what I mean when I say to put something down. I don't mean to push it away or suppress it. I mean to understand that it's here and you're struggling with it, but you are not it. When you're doing this, of course, at that moment, that's often as far as you can go. I'm not this, I'm not this. I am not this. Every time it comes up in the mind, every time you feel the mind clench, you say, I'm not this. And this may take some time for it to go away, especially if you're struggling with something that feels to you like it's big or monumental in some way. But eventually it will diminish in intensity and it will go away. And you'll pop out the other side and you'll realize that it wasn't you. It was a thought pattern you were engaged in. It was a mental difficulty. It was an experiential difficulty and it was a struggle. But you are not that. And then when you're doing this, once the intensity of the circumstances has passed, then you can ask yourself, well, then who am I if I wasn't that? I can see that now. I saw it come, I saw it go, I saw it pass, and I know I'm not that. I cannot be that because it isn't here in this moment. Now you can ask yourself, then who am I? Now we begin to come off of the surface level of dealing with the tendencies in the mind, going into a deeper level, searching for who we are in the heart of being, as consciousness and awareness itself. So for you, just keep going.
As you are speaking, I feel in my body something going like a buzzy feeling. And I'm feeling it at the moment in my body. And sometimes that feeling comes to me. And it feels very good and positive. I guess I'm wondering, what is that? What is that? I mean, is that what we are talking about? Is this what we're talking about? I just feel like my body is just like everything is tingling.
Yes. So this is referred to as the current in the English translation, right? And this current, it's said, if we just watch this, right, without that rising of the mind that says, what is this? And, this feels good, I want to keep this, I want to grab onto this, I want to make this happen all the time.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, the natural tendency of the mind to go toward what's pleasant. Most people feel this, and it comes from a deep state of relaxation that's happening on a bodily level. When the mind is free, the body has this current that's there, it's present all the time. But most of the time we're not aware of it.
Yeah, it happens a lot when I'm singing bhajans or kirtan or something like that.
Yes, through devotion. That's actually the way that most people who take up any kind of a spiritual tradition in the East, where there is kirtan, singing, bhajan, these kind of practices, dancing. Yeah, this is the consequence of that. But it's not the creation of something, it's the recognition of something.
And it comes and goes.
Yes. Yes. So, because it comes and goes, inherent in it is the opportunity to ask, what's aware of this? But it's not necessary that you ask that.
It's not necessary.
It's not necessary if the current is there.
Yeah.
If the current is there, just watch it.
Yes.
No, don't be with it. Don't I'm being with it.
Yeah.
Just watch it.
Yes.
Right? Allow the attention to settle into that. Because as you said, what you feel when you feel that current is it's pleasurable, right? Yeah? Well, this is happiness. This is the physical equivalent of the mental notion of happiness. This is inherent in the body-mind experience, but is usually covered. And if you go to people who are into Kundalini and Shaktipat in India, they have all sorts of different kinds of ways that they will try in some way to show you that this energetic quality of the body-mind is present all the time. And so they have initiations and so forth where they say, well, we can activate this and you can spend a lot of money or not. attempting to come to this place where you can feel the natural state of the body-mind, which is energetic and pleasurable and happy. But this really only happens because what you're doing is dropping the stories of me. You're willing to just be here. This is why Ramana Maharshi always said, remain as you are. What he was pointing toward was that is the more we drop me, the more we drop mine, the more we drop the stories, the more we're able to understand who we are. And part of this understanding, there is this experience of this energetic quality. Not everyone experiences it. I want to say, just because you haven't experienced what she's speaking about, doesn't mean you're failing in some way. Not everybody experiences this energetic quality, but many people do. Waiting.
So you mentioned earlier about some people who are not in that awareness at all, who are, that it's a blessing to be able to come back.
To notice that you are here now, that you're aware. Yeah.
I guess I've been wondering a lot, like, what if somebody can't? Like, either their brain doesn't work properly, and does that mean they're confined to essentially hell?
No, of course not.
Because they can't, and I mean, that brings me back to me in my forgetting. It's the same thing. Sometimes in those moments I'm not able to even bring into my consciousness to be aware, but then if you were to take it further, when your brain's not working properly, like say someone has dementia or something like that, it seems like if they can't question, if they can't inquire, if they can't be present because their mind doesn't work properly in a physical way, what that means.
And why do you have an interest in this?
Because I have a family member who's...
Okay.
And I feel like myself. I feel... I got dementia. but just that there's something wrong. It doesn't have to be dementia. It's just something wrong that keeps me away from being able to be present.
Well, those are two different things, so let's talk about them separately because they aren't the same thing, even though your mind is trying to conflate them. They actually aren't the same thing because, number one, everyone is free of that situation that you're talking about in the moment that they remember who they are, or the moment that they remember, I am not this. And I understand what you're saying, which in a way is the same thing that she was saying, which is that when you're in that forgetfulness, it's very difficult. But understand that you have come back here, right, today. So that's an indicator that you haven't forgotten completely, no matter how difficult the mental difficulties in between the last time. Let's say you walked out of here last time you were here, you completely forgot, you were living in that forgetfulness the whole time, but there was a moment in which you remembered, oh, today is satsang, I'm going to go over there. So this presence comes back. Even though it's using an external support, the support of Satsang is today. That's an external support, right? But you use it. But that's only the indicator that presence is there all along. Because if forgetfulness was what was there all along, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. It's presence, which reminds you, oh, it's Sunday morning, I'm going to Satsang, right? Even if I've forgotten all week long, I've been in this forgetfulness. So, for you, this is the starting point maybe? So you continue. So the instruction is the same as for her. She's reached a place where this presence or this remembrance is happening spontaneously, right, throughout her experience during the week. Sometimes prompted by music or kirtan or dancing or something else, or walking down the street on a beautiful day. So something prompts it, but it brings her back. So if your way right now is that you can only remember once a week on Sunday, then you just keep doing that. Because remember, the mind is always conditioned by what is present in this moment. So if you come to satsang, you're putting into place a new type of conditioning, right? Your conditioning before is forgetfulness, right? Struggle, whatever. But now you're coming every week and you're putting into place this new type of conditioning, which is called remembrance. So you show up, and for these couple of hours, you gain some freedom from the forgetfulness, from the struggle, and so on. But eventually, whether that takes 2 weeks or it takes 2 years, eventually you start to have the experience which she is having, which is the remembrance can come from other spontaneous moments in awareness. Right? This is very different from someone who has the mental difficulty of, say, Alzheimer's or dementia of some sort. Because there is a physical component to this. But one of the things I've noticed as I've watched friends and family experience this is that it's usually much more of a difficulty for the people around them than it is for them. Right? Their here-nowness may not allow them to necessarily remember my face when I walk in the room. But it doesn't prevent them from being here now in whatever space they're in. Right? So in that case, the way we can be present with that person and assist them in their way is not to put our requirements on them. Just allow them, this is the experience they're having. For whatever reason, we don't know. Whether this is somehow karmically related, we can't say. We just don't know. This is just the experience they're having.
I guess you would maybe apply that to somebody who's maybe unable to be on a spiritual path, maybe. I mean, I was talking about that one example where they can't. Then there's me who I'm trying, and then there's people who don't want to try, and interaction with them too can be difficult. And I guess how you just look at them like this is their experience and detach from it, and I mean it just seems pretty hard to relate to people who are not trying to be self-aware or
yes. It is difficult. There isn't any doubt about that. But the difficulty for them is an opportunity for you. Because one of the things that is happening is that you're facing you're looking straight at the opportunity to ask yourself, who am I? You see, this is another tendency in the mind, is that when we face a difficult situation, a difficult person, or a circumstance which we would like to change if we could, we forget that what we're doing is we're trying to paste our expectations over someone else, and we're not realizing that someone being there, different from us, right? Different from the way I feel about my life and what I think is important, is that we have the opportunity to ask this question, who am I? And can I pull back my expectations on that person? Let them be the way they are. Well, I remain as I am. Giving space for everything that wants to come to come. It's important to recognize that when you do this kind of practice, when you are in the presence of people and situations which are difficult, that as you remain as you are, quiet, if that's what's required of you in that moment, because you can't verbally express what you'd like to share with them. You know, I'd love to share with you my spiritual practice because I see you're suffering. Understand that that impulse is coming out of compassion, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should overlay that, your compassion, on someone else. Because of the inherent judgment that's there, your compassion is not going to be felt, right? I want to give you this because I think it's better, or I think I know better, or whatever, you know, or because I love you. But I'm still not going to put that expectation on you. Our path is always to love unconditionally whatever is here, whoever is here. And part of that is the recognition that I must stand here, sit here quietly while this person struggles.
Sometimes I don't do that. Like, it just, the reaction comes.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, in those
Yeah.
moments, it feels uncontrollable, you know, when you feel like you gotta input, you know, give input to them,
Right.
or.
Right. But have you noticed what happens when you try to input into someone who's not open to your input?
Yeah, it's a disaster, yeah.
Right.
For both.
What starts out as an impulse to help becomes a punch in some way. And then this struggle begins to happen. But you see, this is only something that you can know through experience, right? You can only know what the limitations of your ability to impact someone else is through the experience of trying and failing. So this is the benefit of it. But over time, what you learn is almost every time that you remain as you are right now, you know, in this mode of aware questioning, what is this? What is happening here? And do I need to interact? Do I need to interject here? Right? The more you do that, the more you see that every time you back away from that pressure which is coming from inside you, to change that person, judge that person, give them something, even to feel compassion toward them in some way, what happens is that you can watch people suddenly drop the storyline that they were starting to feel the resistance of your trying to push on them, and they were starting to react. But suddenly, if you're not there, if there's no me, and there's no need to intervene here, there's just loving kindness toward what is present in this moment, even if it means that I have to hold my tongue. You can watch people just drop their stories and suddenly change their mind about the direction they were going in. And then you begin to see, yes, I see that this self-reflection, this who am I question, right? Who is it that needs to do anything about anything, has an impact energetically on what's happening. And this can cause people to just stop in their tracks. They no longer have the need to defend whatever story they were telling you about who they are. You should try it.
What I find is very difficult, and this is probably just because I'm not mature in my practice, is the just the reaction. It's a reaction. It's the intense I that's going to change things. And if I were to stop, I could see everything that you're saying, and I agree and I believe, but this is the reaction, and this is like
Right.
You
Yeah,
know,
but
and this one,
yes, but
Uh.
understand that this one that you're talking about, this strong reaction, this is all you're really saying when you say that. If you take it out of the realm of belief that there is something wrong with it, what you can see is that this is just because I've done this so many times, it's become my habit, right?
mhm,
This creates a momentum that sits inside us, waiting for the next opportunity to do that, right? This habit has a momentum and it wants to express itself. So, yeah, it takes some time to retrain this habit pattern in the mind. But it can be done. I would bet if I were to go around the room, and I'll include myself in this, and ask everybody if they can relate to this kind of reactive quality, every single one of us would say absolutely that we have been in this place you're talking about. But if I were to ask everybody, are you there now? A lot of people would say, well, sometimes, but no, I used to be there a lot more. This is myself. Used to be there a lot more than I am now. You know, that I'm not reactive that way. Well, how did you get there? Through realizing the limitation that you're expressing, which is, oh, this just doesn't work anymore. Understand that the wisdom of your own mind. You're sitting there saying, yeah, this happens all the time, right? But don't identify with that, because what's happening for you now is, I can see this happening all the time and I want to change this, right? This is the wisdom of self-knowledge that's beginning to come to you. It's already there. But it's not going to overcome the momentum of that conditioning.
that almost
one,
creates
two,
more judgment because I know better, but there I go. You know, and
Well-
I know it's a trap. It's
No,
it's
no,
the
but
habit.
yeah, but that's what the mind does, you know, right? But understand, come back over here to this. So we're going to just to pause it for a moment. We know this is a liberated sage, so we're going to somehow accept his statement, his judgment on this thing, on this kind of activity. Let me find it really quickly. This is the final understanding of someone who has been through the process which you are going through, right? And is saying, I'm going to make a difference here. I'm going to change it somehow. So I would just want to remind you that what the sage says about the end of the process you're going through, you're experiencing right now, is this. Struggling or at rest, nothing is won or lost. Nothing is won or lost. I have forsaken the joy of winning and the sorrow of losing. For pleasures come and go. How often have I watched their inconsistency? This is what you're watching right now. This is the direct experience of it. Coming out of your innate wisdom, not coming out of the conditioning. You're seeing the inconsistency of all of this and saying there has to be a way. He gives the way in the very last sentence. But I have forsaken good and bad. So he's telling us, when we're in the situation you're in, we have to give up our judgment that this is good or bad. I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing it. I can see the inconsistency in it, and I hate it. It's that whole dialogue. He says, if you want to be free of all this, understand that you have to forsake. This is a strong word, isn't it? Right? So he's implying that you have to meet this conditioning with some strong intentionality. You must forsake good and bad. He's not saying you stop being a good person and you become a bad person. He's saying you have to give up the whole dialogue of the mind which is around that things are either good or bad. They aren't. They either support awakening or they don't.
Could I say that then that the inquiry is what is going to help me forsake that judgment? Because that judgment's
Yes.
automatic.
Yes. You see, it's automatic. The appearance of it is automatic in the mind. That's what I mean by conditioning and momentum, right? That before it appears there's even a space, boom, that conditioning is there. It's automatic. What inquiry is about, what spiritual life is not about judging what we see in the mind. It's about saying, yeah, this is here, and I'll make another choice. You see? It's not about putting down the mind. It's about saying, I see that this is here. And my experience, my direct experience in my own life says this doesn't work. And I want to change this. And so, I'm not going to react in that way right now. I see that I've already reacted in the mind, but I'm not going to get out there and put it off on another person. Right? So the way the practice can look for you is that when you feel that it has risen in the mind, it's right there, and you really want to tell this person what you think of it, you keep quiet. That's it. You just don't spread it around. The difficulty, right? You don't push that person to try to go into this conversation with you just because you want to make it better for them, you want to change them, you want to show them a better way, however you're perceiving it in yourself. I don't force this on you. Because that's different from someone who says to you, well, I invite you to just be here with me. See, I don't reject you because of what's going through your mind right now.
So I'm a little frustrated.
And who knows that?
Well, that's the point. I mean, that I can understand this stuff, and then I can't. And when I can't, when I'm not there, I will react, and that's the scary part.
Yes.
You know.
Right now. But are you also here in this moment challenging this whole way of being that you have experienced for yourself in the past? Isn't that what you're doing here?
I hope so. I mean, yeah.
Well, then give yourself credit for that. One of the things that's true of mind is that mind loves to pile on all of the failings, shortcomings, however you want to call them, that the mind says it thinks we have. But it's very reluctant to say, good job. You're trying to make change here. Good job. It's very reluctant to praise and to hold the body-mind with compassion. That's what I'm asking you to do. Even when the mind is being very difficult. The tendency with this kind of conditioning is to want to keep piling on. To keep saying, I don't get it, I don't understand it, I'm terrible, I'll never get it, I'm too stupid. The mind just wants to keep. But this is a defense mechanism for the mind. It's not the truth of who you are. Conditioning says you are all of these things that you have experienced in the past, and that it will never be any different for you. This is the conditioning of mind. Okay? So for you, be here. Keep coming here. Because that's how you are challenging that self-description right now. And I can sit here for a long time and listen to you tell me about how horrible you are.
I could do it.
Yeah, I know you could. And I can sit here just as long and say, but that's just your mind. That's not true of you. And eventually this conversation will break down. So let it break down now. Ah, there was a crack. I saw that crack. I just confused your mind. What did that feel like for you?
Well, it just had a rebuttal.
Uh,
It just rebutted.
and what did you do about that?
I listened to it.
Kept quiet though, but you kept quiet. You came right back to me. I saw you go, and then you came right back. So you can do this. You are doing it. Now what I want you to do is give yourself some credit for that. So that every time your mind says you're not getting it, you don't understand, or wants to say to me, but you don't understand how crazy this mind is, you just keep coming back. Just let that story go. Don't let the fact that that story is present in your mind define who you are. Even you acknowledge the story is there. Is that the sum total of who you are? Or is there more to you than that story? That's what I mean when I say you come back. You keep coming back to this recognition that there is more to you than that story.
Okay, coming back.
Yeah. You see, you are gaining experience in this. You are becoming more able. Even I have to prompt it, that's okay. That's why we're here. But each time we do this with you, it becomes clearer and clearer that you're coming back more and more. Even if it takes us a while to kind of get through that thicket or that bramble bush, you do come back here in this moment to being present with me. This is progress. Very good. Trayambakam yajamahe Sugandhim pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva bandhinam Mrityormukshiyamamritahuva Swaha Bhuva Bhu Om Sat Jum Ham Om. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.